Hey, welcome back. Tonight, we're going to travel far back in time. So, before you get too comfortable, maybe dim the lights, pull up a blanket, and let your mind drift somewhere old, drafty, and full of secrets. Because tonight we're going to peek through wooden shutters, listen at stone walls, and discover just how dangerous it was to let your heart, or other parts of you, wander in the Middle Ages. Enganar tu pareja podia costarte la cabeza. Vae visas, bueno, algo más. So ready? Here's what's waiting for you tonight. Hey, you're still here. That's good. I like that. So, before we really step into this crooked old manor, take a moment, adjust your blanket, breathe a little slower. Feel the room around you soften, the shadows grow just a touch longer. Because tonight, we're not in your warm bedroom. No. Tonight, we're sitting in a cold, drafty corridor where the stone floor pinches your bare feet, and the only light comes from a stubborn little candle that flickers whenever the wind sighs through the cracks in the shutters. Imagine this. It's late. So late that even the kitchen cats have curled up near the dying embers. But there's someone awake. A young wife, maybe 17 summers old, skin pale against her heavy linen nightgown. She sits on the edge of a rough wooden bench, ears pricked to every creak and groan the house makes. Her heart thumps so loud she swears it might wake the dogs. She holds the candle close, the wax dripping over her fingers. The air smells of old rushes, damp wood, and something sharp. Fear, maybe, or excitement. Did she hear footsteps? Or was that just the wind nudging the shutters? Outside, the courtyard is black, but behind one of these doors, someone is waiting. Someone who shouldn't be here. Someone who shouldn't be touching the edge of her sleeve in the dark. Picture her fingers trembling as she stands. The corridor is so narrow her candle almost brushes the tapestries. Those moth-eaten wool scenes of knights and saints, stitched by hands like hers, bored and yearning for something more than prayers. Maybe her husband lies, snoring 3 rooms away. Or maybe he's out, hunting, drinking, making promises he never intends to keep. And maybe that's why she's here tonight, barefoot on frozen stones, with a heart that wants to burst through her ribs. She tiptoes forward, candle quivering. You can almost hear her breath, soft and quick. You can almost smell the tallow smoke trailing behind her. The old door ahead is warped, swollen by countless damp winters. On the other side is a hand tapping once, twice, the quietest knock you've ever heard. Is it love or ruin? Well, that's the thing about the Middle Ages. A single touch could cost you your soul and your head. So, don't blow out the candle just yet. We're only getting started. Next, let's lean closer and listen for that whisper in the dark. All right, don't move too fast. Stay right here with me, just for a moment longer. Let the blanket slip a little higher on your shoulders. Feel its warmth pressing against your neck while everything else stays hushed and chill. Now, picture this. That same young wife, candle in hand, breath caught between her teeth, finally presses her ear to the old oak door. The wood is rough, splintered where the iron hinges have strained for decades. You can almost feel it under your palm, cold, splintery, alive with tiny drafts seeping through. She hears it then, a voice on the other side, barely more than a breath. A man's voice, softer than a prayer, urgent like a dagger at your ribs. He whispers her name, just her name. Imagine how dangerous a name can feel when it's spoken in secret. No titles, no my lady, just the raw syllables that taste of desire and doom at the same time. She glances over her shoulder, down the corridor, past that flickering candlelight that seems to mock her. What if the housekeeper wakes? What if the stable boy peeks through the crack under the stair? What if, well, it's too late for what ifs now. She lifts the latch. Slowly. It sticks, swollen with damp, squeaks just enough to make her bite her lip. And then, the door shifts open by a finger's width. The candle trembles in her hand. Wax drips onto the rushes at her feet. She sees him, a shadow, really nothing more. He smells of cold night air and sweat and horse leather. He's traveled through the orchard, past the hounds that snarl at strangers. He didn't care. He never does. He leans forward, lips brushing the space near her ear. You can almost hear it, the hush of his breath as it curls against her skin. "Is your husband here?" he murmurs. She doesn't answer. Not really. Her fingers curl around his cloak instead, pulling him closer, so close that her candle flame jumps and nearly dies. But it stays alive like them. Stubborn, flickering, hungry. Imagine the smell in that tiny, airless room. Wax wool, his leather boots caked with mud. Her hair, still sweet from the lavender rinse the maid prepared. Somewhere far below, a dog barks, one sharp warning. They freeze, cheeks brushing. If you were standing there, you'd feel the heat of them, the trembling pulse that can't be hidden under linen and gilt. A door this thin might as well be paper. Anyone passing might hear the rasp of his beard against her cheek. Might see the shadows moving, slow, desperate, like moths pinned to a flame. He whispers again, something you'll never catch. It's not meant for us, the nosy ghosts drifting through this old house tonight. It's for her alone, a promise or a lie. Who knows? In the Middle Ages, love and betrayal are sisters dressed in the same rough wool. And just for a moment, imagine you're her. That rush in your chest, the risk swirling in your gut like good ale on an empty stomach. The thrill that you're alive, that someone wants you. That tomorrow, maybe you'll regret every touch, or maybe you'll want more. The candle flickers again, throwing their shadows up onto the rafters, stretching them long and monstrous. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. Somewhere beyond the walls, an owl calls, the kind of sound that makes your neck prickle. And in this narrow strip of time, between dusk and dawn, she chooses danger. She always does. They always did. So, let's slip away from this door, quiet as a ghost. Leave them tangled in whispers that might cost them their heads when daylight comes. Next, come with me to the muddy village lane where tongues wag louder than church bells. Scandal always travels faster than the wind, especially when you give it something juicy to carry. Next, picture this. The heavy door creaks shut behind them. The young wife, the reckless lover, sealed up in their secret like a wine jug stoppered too tight. But secrets in the Middle Ages, well, they rarely stayed corked for long, did they? Slip your feet into old, cracked leather shoes and step out onto the village lane. Feel how the earth sucks at the soles. All mud and straw and manure churned together. It squelches underfoot, clings to your hem. The air out here is raw, heavy with wood smoke and the tang of dung fires burning in squat hearths. Somewhere nearby, pigs grunt in a sty, nosing for scraps beneath a splintered fence. But above it all, sharper than the smell, sharper than the chill that nips at your nose, is the buzz of voices. Imagine the villagers, the bent old thatcher, his shoulders dusted with straw. The toothless widow who pretends to mind her own pots, but listens for every slip of scandal. The girls who carry water from the well, baskets balanced on hips, gossip balanced on their tongues. You see, in a world without papers or printed pages, people became the parchment. Every careless word, every flicker of a glance between two lovers who should have been strangers, it etched itself on the minds of people who had little else to do but remember. And repeat again, with each telling sweeter, juicier, sharper than the last. Picture an alehouse at dusk, low beams black with soot, benches sticky with old spills. A dozen men huddle near the hearth, mugs of rough beer warming their cracked hands. Their voices roll and rumble like a storm brewing just over the hills. And there, in the swirl of the smoke, is the spark. One of them leans in, breath sour with onions and bad ale. "Did you hear," he slurs, "about the young wife up at the manor?" A few heads turn. He smirks, lips splitting into a grin with too many gaps. A visitor, they say, slipped through the orchard gate. Dogs never barked. Funny that. A low whistle, a wet chuckle, a slap on the back. The story grows legs, then arms, then claws. Meanwhile, the baker's boy, all of 10 and quick as a mouse, crouches by the door. He's not meant to hear, but of course he does. And tomorrow, when he runs bread up to the manor's cook, he'll let it slip, oh so innocent. The hint of a name, a wink of a time, a nod toward the stable. And the cook, bored of stirring stews and scrubbing cauldrons, will lean over the garden wall that afternoon. She'll share it with a washerwoman who will take it down to the riverbank. By sunset, the ducks and the reeds will have heard it too, because that's how it worked. No locks on lips, no mercy for the wandering heart. Every doorway was a mouth, every window an eye. Gossip ran faster than horses, carried by children, caught in the hems of skirts, wrapped up in baskets of eggs and cabbages. It stuck to you like mud on your boots. You could scrape and scrape, but it never quite came off. Imagine being that wife, staring out the tiny window at dawn, her lover long gone, her hair smelling of him still, and a cold pit in her belly when she sees the housemaid glance too long at her sleeves, still rumpled from the night. Or the farmhand who looks away too quickly when she passes. Or the priest who clears his throat twice before he says, "Good morning." She knows, oh she knows, that it's already out there on 100 wagging tongues. And she knows what happens next. A whisper might just be a whisper in your warm bed tonight. Harmless, gone by morning. But in that village lane, in that century of sharpened pitchforks and petty revenge, a whisper could be the rope around your neck, or the axe glinting in the square come Sunday. So, careful where you lean in to listen. Careful what secrets you trust to the dark. Next, we'll slip into a low cottage where betrayal lies folded in linen, locked away, waiting for the wrong hands to find it. Let's see what a hidden chest under the bed might cost you when the world wants your sin to spill. Next, picture this. An old thatched cottage huddled at the edge of the village, its roof sagging under the weight of too many damp winters. The air inside smells of wet wool, old smoke, and something faintly sweet. Lavender bundles strung up in the rafters to keep the fleas away. It's late, always late in these stories, and the single candle stub has burned down to a puddle of wax that drips onto a chipped saucer. In the far corner, near the hearth where embers blink like sleepy eyes, stands a narrow bed, its straw mattress lumpy and leaking. If you crawled on your hands and knees, you'd see it. A small iron-bound chest tucked up under the frame, half hidden by a faded blanket that smells of years and secrets. Imagine the man who put it there. Let's call him Osric, a common name for an uncommon risk. By day, he's a cooper. He makes barrels for the brewer, fixes the priest's leaking rain butt. He smiles at his neighbors, nods to the reeve, scratches the church cat behind the ears on his way to market. Nothing suspicious, nothing strange. But when night comes, he lifts the rush mat, slides the chest out onto the splintered floorboards. The lock is simple, a twist of metal, no bigger than a boy's thumb, but inside, oh, what it guards. Scraps of parchment, corners browned and curling. Sealed letters, tied with frayed string and stained with the dribble of red wax that always manages to catch under the fingernail. If you held one close enough to your nose, you might smell old ink, rose water, the ghost of a perfumed kiss. They're from her, not his wife, no. She sleeps a few feet away, curled into herself, her back turned, the shape of a tired mother, a tired wife, tired of everything but the endless churn of work. But these letters, they're from Alice. Alice, who lives in the next hamlet, who picks wild thyme from the hedgerow, who laughs too loud and pulls her wimple low when she crosses Osric's path. She writes in a hand that stumbles over the words, but her meaning is sharp enough to cut through wool and bone alike. She writes of fields where they meet at dusk, of promises whispered against stone walls while the sun sinks like a hot coal, of the baby she might carry, his or her husband's. Who can tell? Imagine Osric's rough thumb tracing each line. His mouth tastes of stale ale and guilt. He should burn them. God knows he should. The priest would waggle a bony finger. The reeve would hiss about sin and stocks. But he can't. The words are sweeter than the fear. So he folds them back into the chest, lowers the lid, slides it under the bed. Every night the same. Now, picture this. One morning, while Osric is off at the cooper's yard, the wife lifts the mattress to shake out the bugs. She sees the edge of the chest, the glint of iron where there shouldn't be any iron. Her breath catches. Her hands are red and cracked from lye soap and chopping onions, but they are steady as she drags the chest into the light. The lock yields to a twist of the poker, a soft snap, like a bone breaking underfoot in the dark woods. She lifts the parchment, each letter a snake curling around her throat. The words bite. The perfumed ghost slaps her across the face. She doesn't scream. No, she sits by the hearth, lips pressed white, the letters laid across her lap like a shroud. She reads them all, every scratched vow, every foolish line that says, "I'll take you away." She watches the embers spit and hiss. The shadows creep up the walls, gnawing at the rushes. She pictures Alice, wild thyme, red hair, careless giggle. She pictures her husband's hands, those same hands that once rested on her cheek before they learned to hide in the dark. When Osric returns, the cottage is quiet, too quiet. He smells stew on the hearth. He sees his wife by the window, the letters gone, her back stiff as the broom propped beside her. She doesn't look at him when he asks where his boots are, or if the dog got fed. She just says, "Sleep well tonight, husband." And in her voice is a promise older than parchment, older than wax. A promise that sin will always come home, in a sack, or a whisper, or a bloodied stick behind the cowsheet. Outside, the wind rattles the thatch. The chest is gone, fed to the fire maybe, or buried under the cabbage patch. But the words remain. They always do. And so does the wife, sitting by the window, waiting. Not for him, not for her, but for the next lie that needs burying under the bed. So, hush now. Let's slip back out the door before she turns her eyes on us. Next, we'll head down the road, where the tavern doors swing open to spill out drunken secrets. Because sometimes, all it takes is a mug of ale to set a village on fire. Next, picture this. The wind pushing at your back as you lean into the low door of the village alehouse. It sticks, swollen from rain, and you have to shove your shoulder against it to slip inside. And then, warmth. The slap of hot, stale air that smells like yeast and sweat, and the tang of spilled beer soaking into the straw-strewn floor. The smoke from the hearth curls low under the soot-black beams, stinging your eyes just enough to make you blink away the rest of the outside world. Now, settle in. Imagine the weight of a rough bench under you, the splinters catching your cloak, your elbows planted on a table that's seen 100 fists slammed down in anger or laughter. Listen, hear it? The creak of the alewife's ladle dipping into a barrel, the clink of pewter mugs sliding across sticky wood, the thick rumble of men talking too loud, too close, words bubbling up like broth left too long on the fire. See them, the farmhands with dirt still caked under their nails, the miller's apprentice trying to pass for a man grown, the toothless shepherd who smells faintly of wet wool and dog. And in the corner, a pair who should know better, shoulders brushing, voices low, breath sweet with secrecy. It starts small, always does. One sip, then another. The tongue loosens faster than the purse strings ever will. A man lifts his mug, foam dripping into his beard. He laughs too loud at nothing at all. Then, the spark. A word out of place, a slip of a name, a brag half meant to impress. Did you hear, he slurs to the man next to him, about the Reeves' daughter? The other man leans in, ale sloshing over his thumb. Go on. And so it goes. A name traded for a secret traded for another round. The alewife watches it all, her hands never stopping, wiping the boards, filling the mugs, slipping a sharp eye into every corner. She knows which drunks will fight before the night is out. She knows which ones are fools and which ones are dangerous. She knows that stories breed faster in the alehouse than rabbits in spring. Picture her slipping behind the barrel stack to catch her breath. Her apron smells of yeast and sweat. Her feet ache, but her ears are worth more than a monk's best parchment. She hears about the stable boy and the miller's wife. She hears about the peddler who keeps more than buttons and needles in his pack. She hears about the knight's squire who sneaks into the orchard after the gate is barred. Sometimes she files these scraps away, a whispered threat to keep the blacksmith from cheating her on horseshoes. Sometimes she passes them along, slips a word to the reeve when the taxes come due, so he knows which pockets are lined with stolen coins, which beds are warmed by the wrong feet. And sometimes, when the ale runs out and the shutters are bolted, she tells them to her daughter, tucked in the loft above the hearth, little ears wide as the moon, soaking up sin and scandal before she even knows what the words mean. But back in the corner, let's lean closer now. The farm boy with straw in his hair has had too much. His head wobbles as he tries to hush himself, but the secret spills out anyway. He talks of the lady at the manor, the one with soft hands and softer eyes. How he saw her slip into the stables at dawn, her slippers muddy, her breath steaming in the cold air as she tugged at the stable hand's cloak. One of the old men snorts, spittle shining on his lips, and slaps the table. She'll get herself to the stocks, that one. Or worse, the ducking stool. Or worse still, he drags a thumb across his throat. The boy shivers, sobered by his own tongue. But the words are out now. Tomorrow they'll hitch a ride on the miller's cart, roll down the lane, reach the manor gates before the cockerel crows. The lady will see it in the cook's eyes when she comes down for bread. She'll feel it in the hush of the maids, the quick turn of the reeve's back when she passes. Secrets are never safe where the ale flows thick and the floorboards creak with restless feet. Picture the fire burning low. The alewife tosses another log on, sending sparks skipping up the flue. She hums under her breath, a tune older than the church bells, older than the sin she ladles out by the mug. Outside, the wind rattles the sign above the door, a battered wooden tankard swinging on a rusty hook. It groans like an old man who's heard it all before. Inside, the last drunk mumbles a confession into his cup. Maybe it's a lie. Maybe it's the truth. In the alehouse, they taste the same, bitter and warm, gone by dawn, but never really gone. So, sip your drink down. Wipe the foam from your lip. Next, we're off to the high stone fortress where secrets were silk and steel, and the price of a midnight touch might just be a kingdom undone. Picture this. A high fortress perched on a wind-bitten hill. The walls loom heavy and gray, streaked dark where rain and time have kissed the stone for 100 winters. A wooden drawbridge creaks under the weight of your footsteps, the iron portcullis yawning like the teeth of some old beast that's swallowed too many stories to count. Inside, the air shifts, colder than the fields below, but carrying a different scent. Not just straw and sweat and stale ale like the village. No, here the cold is laced with candle smoke and rushes strewn fresh on the floors to mask the smell of damp stone. There's a whisper of rose, oil too, clinging to the sleeves of noble women who pass, their skirts brushing the same flagstones where traders once bled out under moonlight. Imagine walking these corridors at night. The sconces spit light that trembles on the walls, the shadows long and restless. Here, every footstep is a question. Who's awake? Who's listening? Who's slipping behind which heavy oak door when they should be sleeping in their own feather bed? Let's follow one of them now. Picture her, Lady Sibylla, young enough that the lines of courtly etiquette feel tight as a bridle on her throat, but old enough to know how to slip the bit when the doors are locked. Her gown rustles like dry parchment as she moves, candle in hand, slippers soft against the stone. Somewhere in the hall behind her, a guard clears his throat, but he won't follow. He knows better than to sniff at the business that seeps through these old castle walls. She pauses at a narrow passage, her eyes darting left, then right. Her candle flame dances across an ancient tapestry. Knights in bright thread, all swords and piety, mocking her from their faded perch. She presses her ear to a door, listens. A heartbeat in the dark. Two. Then a hand, large, ringed in scars from battle, lifts the latch from the other side. The door opens. The room inside is barely larger than a closet. A forgotten old solar that smells of stale books and damp fur cloaks. But it's warm tonight, feverish with secrets. Sir Alaric, her husband's captain-at-arms, stands there, his armor cast off, his tunic unlaced just enough to show the shape of him. Imagine the way the torchlight catches the sweat on his collarbone, the flush in his cheeks that is half guilt, half want. They don't speak at first. Words feel clumsy in this narrow space, like dropped coins echoing down a well. Instead, their hands do the talking. The hush of silk slipping over calloused fingers, the soft gasp when her candle guttering on the window ledge throws them into near darkness. Outside, the courtyard sleeps. The horses shift in their stalls, hooves thudding against wooden walls. A lone owl watches from the battlements, head cocked, its eyes catching the torchlight like two gold coins lost to the night. But within these stones, it's anything but still. Their breath rattles off the walls. Their hushed promises melt into moans that could drown in the crackle of a dying hearth. And all the while, the castle keeps its own account. The walls know who trespassed. The walls always know, because here, lust doesn't just risk a jealous spouse or a wagging tongue. Here, betrayal can crack the very mortar that hold the crown in place. One lover's slip can mean an heir who doesn't look quite right, a claim contested in some smoky hall, a family torn apart by whispered questions that spill out like wine on an already stained table. And those who serve them, they watch. The kitchen boy carrying jugs of water for the lady's bath. The lady's maid who scrubs blood from sheets when these secret meetings bring consequences no one will name. The steward who finds a cloak tangled beneath the wrong bed and tucks it away, saving the truth for a day when it might be worth silver or his life. Picture the morning after. Lady Sibylla in her grand solar, sunlight bleeding through the narrow windows, brushing a comb through her hair while her husband stands nearby, heavy in his mail and frowning at reports of bandits on the border. He looks at her, suspicion flickering like a shadow across his brow. He knows, or he guesses, but for now he says nothing. His lands are safe, his knights loyal, his power unshaken. Yet, she lowers her eyes, lips soft as butter, a small smile where her shame should be. Meanwhile, Sir Alaric watches from the courtyard, his breath hanging pale in the dawn air, his sword strapped across his back like an oath he never intends to keep. Because in these castle walls, the cost of lust is never just the price of a single night. It's paid out in blood feuds, poisoned cups, marriages torn like rotted banners in the rain. A crown can tumble just as easily as a heart can slip. So, hush now. Let's slip away before the steward's footsteps echo too close behind. Before that heavy oaken door swings wide, and we're caught listening where we shouldn't. Next, we'll sit beside the hearth in a small cottage where a scorned wife plans her revenge with fingers stiff from scrubbing floors. Because sometimes, the worst punishment doesn't come from a judge, but from the quiet rage that grows behind your own front door. Picture this. A crooked cottage crouched at the edge of the village. Its wattle and daub walls bulging here and there like a belly too full of bitter secrets. The thatch leaks when a rain comes, the hearth spits more smoke than flame, and the air inside is always heavy, with the smell of boiled root vegetables, damp while drying near the fire, and a quiet anger that settles in the corners like a barn cat no one dares chase out. Inside, we find her, Agnes, let's call her. Hands cracked from scrubbing boards with coarse lye. Hair pinned up so tight it pulls her temples into thin lines of ache. Her eyes, though, her eyes are bright as coals, flecked with the same iron she's learned to hide in the hem of her apron. Agnes has known for weeks. Oh yes, weeks now. It was the change in his step that gave him away first. The way Thomas, her husband, came home late with straw on his tunic that didn't match their stable. How he smelled faintly of honeyed ale and a sweetness that had nothing to do with the stews she'd left simmering for him. Then there were the whispers. The neighbor girl, wide-eyed and eager to trade gossip for a piece of salted pork. The milkmaid, who couldn't meet Agnes's stare at the market. The hint of a laugh that wasn't hers drifting through the hedgerow when she went to fetch firewood early one dawn. But Agnes is no fool. She doesn't shriek or fling her apron over her face, like the stories say good wives should. No, she waits. She listens. She watches him sleep at night, one hand thrown across his belly, a fool's grin ghosting his lips even in dreams. She scrapes his dinner into his bowl, just like always, wipes the dribble from his chin when he drinks too deep from his mug. And every day, she plans. Picture her at the hearth, the pot bubbling slow with a thin broth that smells of onions and sorrow. She stirs it with a wooden spoon, her thumb pressed against a small pouch hidden under her sleeve. A pouch that holds more than salt. Some say it's just superstition. Those dried foxglove petals, the crushed leaves of a plant her mother taught her to pluck when the moon was new. But in the right brew, they'll make a man's belly twist like a snake in a snare. Not enough to kill him, mind you. Agnes has no wish for the gallows, but enough to send him doubled over in the privy, sweating and praying for mercy, while the village whispers that his strength is failing, that maybe he's cursed. A fitting shame for a man whose lips tasted of another's secrets. Or maybe, on some nights, she dreams of worse. A pot of water set to boil not for soup, but for the skin of the woman whose giggle floats through the hedgerow. A sudden slip of the axe when Thomas is splitting logs, Agnes's steady hand accidentally nudging him off balance. Or maybe, just maybe, she dreams of the pox coming for him in the night, a punishment sent by God himself, so her hands stay clean. But she doesn't do it yet. She waits. She lets the rumor grow roots, like a weed sprouting through the thatch. She lets the neighbor's eyes linger too long when Thomas limps into church, pale and sweating, the shame creeping up his neck like a rash. She lets him see her watching, not angry, not weeping, just knowing. And every knowing glance digs deeper than any blade could. Imagine Thomas one evening, hunched at the hearth while Agnes ladles his broth. He winces at the bitter taste, tries to swallow the lump in his throat that isn't just the food. He wants to speak, to confess maybe, or to blame her, or to promise he'll be better. But Agnes shushes him with a small, sharp smile. She wipes his brow with a cloth dipped in lavender water. "Rest, husband," she murmurs. "You've worked too hard for too long." Her voice is soft as lamb's wool. Her eyes gleam like flint under the dying glow of the fire. Outside, the wind claws at the shutters. A dog barks once, then thinks better of it. Somewhere beyond the hedge, a young girl waits, pacing in the dark, her heart racing with the thrill of forbidden kisses, unaware that she too is tangled in Agnes's quiet web. Because the scorned wife knows how to bide her time. She knows how to make the village talk, and how to make them forget whose hand poured what into whose cup. She knows that the best revenge is slow, steady, and served every night with a ladle and a smile. And when Thomas coughs hard enough to bring up blood, someday, if that day comes, Agnes will press her palm to his cheek, just as she did when they were young. She'll whisper a prayer over his feverish head, her voice trembling just enough to seem true. She'll bury him neat under the apple tree, mark his grave with a cross no bigger than a child's palm. And the village will nod and tut and say she's done right by him. Done right, indeed. So, hush now. Let's slip away from that low fire before Agnes's eyes find us, before her secrets slip into our cup. Next, we'll walk down to the green, where the drums roll at dawn and betrayal earns its shame under the bright, pitiless sky. Because when punishment comes, the whole village wants to watch. Picture this, a patch of trampled earth at the heart of a crooked village, where the grass never grows quite right. Too many boots grinding it down, too much spit and laughter, and rotten fruit left to sour in the dirt. This is the green. Not the lush emerald square you might imagine, but a churned mess of mud, stray feathers, and the stale stink of last week's shame. It's where folks gather for market days, for sermons under a drifting sky when the church is too small, and, most deliciously, where they come to feast on the spectacle of punishment. Imagine you're standing there before sunrise, breath clouding in the chill. You're shoulder to shoulder with neighbors you've known all your life. The blacksmith's big hand resting heavy on the boy's collar, so he doesn't stray too close. The midwife, hands on her hips, eyes bright with the same gleam she gets when she pulls a baby wailing into the world. Children dart between skirts and breeches, giggling, pretending not to be afraid. But you can see the flicker in their eyes, the way they cling to their mothers when the drums begin. Yes, drums. Picture them now. Two boys from the Reeves household, cheeks red from the cold, their small hands thumping a pair of battered skin drums. Boom, boom, boom. The sound trembles through the gathered crowd, tickles your ribs, makes your feet itch to shuffle back a step, because you know what's coming. Everyone knows. Near the stocks stand two pillars of oak, worn smooth by years of flesh pressed against them. The stocks themselves creak on their iron hinges, 3 holes for neck and wrists, the wood stained darker where sweat and tears have sunk in. A rope flutters from the post nearby. No noose today, but enough to make the guilty sweat. Today is for shame, not death, at least not right away. Now, look there, the culprit dragged forward by the constable's rough grip. A young woman this time, hair tangled, shift torn at the sleeve, eyes bright with the wild, feverish look of someone who's swung too close to the flame. Maybe she was caught slipping through the hedgerow at dawn. Maybe her lover's wife tipped off the reeve with a whisper over a loaf of stale bread. Maybe she's guilty, maybe not. Who's to say anymore? Truth and rumor get muddled once they're dragged out into daylight. She trips on a stone, tries to pull away. The crowd ripples with excitement. A hiss of breath, the titter of children not yet old enough to understand, but old enough to revel in someone else's downfall. A bucket of cabbage leaves sits at the ready. The alewife's daughter has a clutch of cracked eggs tucked under her apron, soft shells that will burst sharp and cold against the girl's bare shoulders. Because the stocks are not just punishment, they're entertainment. Imagine the sound with clamping shut, the iron bolt rattling home. The girl jerks, tries to turn her face away from the first wet slap of a rotten apple. Some laugh, some spit, some cross themselves and murmur about sin while their eyes never leave her hunched, shivering figure. A child, bold in his mother's shadow, darts forward and shouts something cruel before racing back, half terrified of his own voice. But here's the curious part. Beneath the shame and the bruises, there's a whisper of defiance. Some stand in those stocks with tears streaming, prayers spilling from cracked lips. Others, like her, lift their chin even when the cabbage hits. They glare through the muck and the mockery, daring the village to look them in the eye. By dusk, she'll be freed, legs stiff, skin stinging, hair matted with whatever the villagers scraped from their larders. She'll walk home, if she has a home, with the echo of laughter clinging to her like burrs on a hem. For weeks, her name will be a sour taste on everyone's tongue. Some will cross the road when she passes. Others will knock on her door late at night, whispering, promising, hoping to taste the sin they condemned at sunrise. Because that's how it goes, isn't it? Public punishment is not just about right and wrong. It's about power. It's a lesson scratched into the dirt where the grass won't grow. A reminder that the village sees, the village knows, the village decides what must be paid and who must bleed. And when the next pair of boots shuffle up to the stocks, next market day, next scandal, the drums will roll again, the crowd will come hungry, and the green will drink it all down. So, brush the cabbage leaves off your cloak. Wipe the egg from your boots. Let's leave this sour patch behind and slip into a place where confessions are made in the hush of incense and old stone. A priest's confessional, where secrets are supposed to stay safe, but sometimes they crawl out anyway. Picture this, an ancient church, squat and stubborn against the roll of the wind. Its stones are patched with lichen, its roof slants just enough to weep rain in buckets by the altar. Inside, the air tastes of candle smoke and centuries of breath caught between prayers. Listen, you can almost hear it. The shuffle of feet across flagstones worn to soft hollows by knees and sorrow. The creak of the heavy door that never quite stays shut against the weather. Slip in with me. Hush now. The morning light slides through a colored window, painting a small corner of the nave in reds and blues that tremble on the rough wooden pews. At the far end, a simple confessional crouches in the shadows. No grand ornamentation. Just old timber, hinges that whine when the door opens, and a thin lattice that's heard things no mortal ears should bear. Picture a man kneeling inside, hat crumpled in his shaking hands, cap pulled low. A husband, maybe with soil under his nails, the taste of betrayal sour on his tongue. Or a young girl, skirts damp from the dew, heart hammering at her ribs while she spills a name that should never pass her lips. Each word seeps through the tiny holes in the screen. An offering, a plea, a bargain with the Almighty, brokered by the thin-lipped man on the other side. Father Oswin, that's what they call him. His hair's gone white as the snow that drifts through the broken window panes in winter. His eyes are watery, always blinking away the dust of crumbling salters. But his ears, sharp still, sharp enough to catch the smallest quiver in a voice. The tremor that says this is more than just a stolen loaf or a fist raised in a drunken haze. No, this is flesh desire, sin that tangles bed linens and bloodlines alike. And here's the curious part. Father Oswin should keep it locked away, bound by the seal of confession, by the weight of his vows, by the promise that these secrets die here in the dark. But he's old, and the world outside the confessional is loud, insistent, full of ears that coax and flatter. The alewife, slipping him a mug of warm ale for his cough. The Reeves wife, who leans a little too close when she lights a candle near his shoulder, eyes sharp as hawk talons, voice dripping with pious concern. Sometimes, when the nights stretch too long in the wind claws of the wooden door, he lets one slip. A small thing, he tells himself, just a hint. A nod toward a name, a muttered God grant them mercy that becomes, in someone else's mouth, a roaring fire of rumor. Imagine the sin that sparks from this carelessness. A young wife's slip about the man who meets her in the orchard. Father Oswin soothes her trembling hands, murmurs prayers over her tear-streaked cheeks, promises the sin will be washed away. But a week later, at the market, he coughs up the wrong phrase to the baker's wife. Tired, cold, the ache in his bones pulling words loose like threads from an old cassock. Pray for her, he says, voice too loud above the clatter of the bread cart. She is led astray, poor child. The baker's wife's eyes glitter, fresh gossip to fold into her dough, to pass her customers along with their daily loaves. Or picture him by the hearth in the rectory, muttering into his cup, not knowing that the sexton's boy is pressed against the wall outside, ears wide open. A careless name spoken in the dark becomes a cudgel in the hands of a jilted husband. A sin confessed in fear becomes the jeer of children throwing stones at a lonely girl walking to the well. Of course, when the villagers come to Father Oswin, tongues wagging, eyes sharp with suspicion, he folds his hands and bows his head, frail, penitent, insisting it's not his doing. He wears his guilt like an old cloak, ragged and familiar. He chants the prayers louder, lights more candles, sprinkles holy water until the pews smell like damp stone and beeswax. But the harm is done. A secret that was meant to wither behind that lattice now dances like flame through the village. The orchard where they met becomes a place no one walks at dusk, for fear of the ghosts of the disgraced. The confessional door swings shut each Sunday, groaning under the weight of fresh sins, but the whispers never stop. And Father Oswin? Sometimes, when he kneels alone at dawn, the chill seeping into his old bones, he asks forgiveness for the loose edge of his tongue. But the wind does not care. It slides through the cracks in the stone, carrying scraps of secrets with it. Secrets that belong to no one, yet ruin everyone just the same. So, hush now. Pull your shawl close around your shoulders. Slip out through the heavy church door before the next penitent slides to their knees, before another secret leaks through a hole that was never meant to let it out. Next, let's follow the dusty road away from this cold stone sanctuary, where a traveling minstrel tunes his lute under a hedgerow and hums songs that carry the filth of one village into the eager ears of the next. Picture this, a ragged ribbon of road cutting through fields speckled with heather and stones older than the churches we've just left. The ruts are deep, filled with muddy water that shivers in the moonlight, and the hedgerows crowd close on either side, sheltering things that creep and crawl and listen for careless feet. And along this road trudges a man, the minstrel. His boots are split at the seams, the laces tied with bits of twine scavenged from the last village he passed through. His cloak is patched with scraps of cloth in so many colors it looks like a rotting flag in the dark. But on his back, a battered lute, strung with gut strings that whine under his thumb, but still sing sweet when he plucks them just right. Imagine him settling under a leaning oak as the last scraps of dusk slip behind the hedges. He props his back against the trunk, loosens his boots, and sets the lute across his knees like a lover waiting for a gentle touch. The night air smells of damp earth, crushed nettles, and the faint curl of wood smoke drifting from a cottage far away. He hums to himself, a tune stitched together from old ballads, half-remembered prayers, and bits of gossip snatched from alehouse benches and manor kitchens alike. Because here's the secret. The minstrel's gift is not just the strings he plucks or the voice he carries like warm wine in his throat. It's the listening. He listens better than any priest, better than the gossiping Reeves' wife. He soaks up whispers like rain in the thatch, tucks them behind his grin, and lets them fester until they're ripe for song. Picture the villagers gathering when he reaches the next hamlet. Rough hands tossing him a crust of bread, a mug of thin ale in trade for a tale. They crowd near the fire, noses red from the wind, eyes wide with the hunger that only a stranger's voice can feed. And he gives it to them, the story of a lady in the high-stone fortress who loves her husband's captain-at-arms. The wife who ladles broth with a secret twist of foxglove in her sleeve. The orchard where kisses bloom at dusk like black roses that leave thorns in your throat. But he weaves it careful. A name here, a place there, changed just enough that they laugh and wag their heads and say, "No, surely not here. Surely that's from the next village over." They don't know they're hearing their own secrets fed back to them, sweetened and sharpened until they stick. And when the fire burns low and the villagers shuffle off to their straw beds, they carry the stories on their tongues, whispers that will drift through shutters tomorrow, slide under doors, bloom in the hedgerows like poison ivy. Sometimes he's paid in silver, a coin slipped into his palm by a man who wants his rival shame-sung in the next town. Sometimes it's fear that fills his belly, the quick look over his shoulder when he passes the Reeves house, the tightening in his gut when a jealous husband fingers the hilt of his knife too long while listening. And yet he keeps walking, because every road is another chance to trade a lie for bread, a scandal for shelter. He's a man with no hearth to keep, no wife to betray him, no priest to confess to, only the road, the strings, and the songs that grow meaner every time the wind blows them back to him. Imagine him now on this quiet night. He plucks at a single note, lets it drift up through the branches of the oak, where an owl watches with eyes like tarnished coins. He hums the name of a girl from the last village, the one who met him behind the mill, who traded a kiss for a promise he never meant to keep. He hums the words of a husband's curse, spat at him when the husband found the girl's hair caught in his rough cloak. And he hums the tune that tomorrow, in the next hamlet, will pour from his lips so sweetly the villagers won't care if it's true. They'll feed him for it anyway. At dawn, he'll stand, sling the lute over his shoulder, wrap his ragged cloak tighter around the secrets curled like fox kits in his chest. His boots will squelch through the ruts again, carrying betrayal from cottage to manor, alehouse to green, a river of stories that never dries up. Because in the Middle Ages, nothing travels faster than a rumor, except the man who makes it rhyme. So, hush now. Listen to the last note fade into the trees. Next, follow the curling smoke back into the village, where a lonely candle burns low over a letter stained with wax and tears, a parchment that could damn two hearts with one careless slip. Picture this, a low cottage crouched beneath the crooked shoulder of a manor wall, not so grand as the castle, not so poor as the hovel at the edge of the woods. Somewhere in between, the kind of place where scandal can hide behind well-brushed rushes and a garden gate painted bright, so no one looks too closely at what happens behind it. Inside, a single candle burns on a table scarred by years of spilled broth and the scrape of knives carving bread too tough for weak teeth. The wax dribbles down the candlestick, pale rivers pooling around a single sheet of parchment spread flat on the boards. Imagine a woman there, not some young giggling bride this time, but a housekeeper perhaps, or a steward's wife. Someone who knows the taste of secrets in a mouth, how they curdle when you swallow them too long. Her hands are rough, the nails chipped from scrubbing at other people's dirt. But tonight, they tremble as she traces each line with the tip of her finger. The letter is short. They always are, when the words are too dangerous to linger. Just a few lines, pressed into the page with a quill cut so crude the strokes catch in the weave of the parchment. My heart aches when you are gone. The orchard gate creaks still, come when the moon is new. And there, at the bottom, the smear, not quite blood, not quite ink, maybe the tear that fell when she folded it the first time. She should burn it. You can almost hear her muttering to herself as the candle flickers. Should hold it to the flame, watch the edges curl and blacken until the shame drifts up the chimney and into the winter night. But her fingers won't let go, because in that scrap of parchment is the proof that someone wanted her once, or maybe still does. Someone who doesn't smell of pig fat and stale ale when he climbs in her bed at night. Someone who slipped her a flower once, pressed into her palm so quickly she almost thought she imagined it, until she found its crushed petals hidden inside her apron pocket weeks later. Picture her now, staring at the words until they swim. The candle sputters. The room smells of tallow smoke, cabbage boiled too long, the faint sweetness of the wax seal. Violet, if you lean close enough. She presses the letter to her chest, eyes shut. Then footsteps. A man's boots on the flagstones outside. Heavy, familiar, unwelcome. She scrambles, the letter clutched in her fist, so tight the wax flakes onto the floor. She shoves it into the crack behind the wainscot, that place behind the cupboard where old mouse droppings tell the story of secrets hidden long before hers. A knock. The door swings wide, spilling the cold night in with him. Her husband. A man whose eyes are too quick, whose mouth is a line that never softens. He smells of ale and wet wool and something sharp, suspicion, maybe. He sniffs the room like a dog searching for the carcass he knows is buried here somewhere. "What's that?" he growls, nodding at the flickering candle. "Nothing." She lies, voice too smooth to be safe. Just a draft. But she can feel the crack behind the wainscot like a burn against her back. She knows if he finds it. That folded slip of parchment with her heart inked into its creases. The stocks would be the least of her worries. A whisper to the reeve, a nod to the priest, a quiet push on the river bridge when no one's looking. The Middle Ages are not kind to a woman with words she should know. He sits at the table, elbow knocking the candle so the wax drips fresh onto the boards. She brings him stew, hand steady now. The letter pulses behind the wainscot, warm as a second heartbeat. Tomorrow, she'll wake before dawn, press her ear to the boards, pull the parchment out with trembling fingers. She'll read it again by the first gray light, mouth shaping each word like a prayer or a curse. She'll promise herself she'll burn it. Truly she will, once she's read it just one more time. But we both know she won't. Nobody ever does. So, hush now. Blow out the candle with her. Listen to the wind rattle the shutters. The man's spoon scrape the bowl. The letter whisper from its hiding place that it will ruin her yet. Next, slip out through the crooked garden gate, down to the barn at the edge of the orchard, where boots crunch the frost and a husband returns too soon to a lover who never meant to be found. Picture this. A barn crouched at the far edge of a small holding, not grand like a manor stables, not so poor that it leaks at every seam, but old enough that the timbers creak when the wind nudges them. The moon hangs low, a thin slice of bone drifting between tattered clouds. You can taste the frost on your lips, the bite of it creeping through your cloak as you press close to the rough planks, ears straining for sounds you shouldn't want to hear. Inside, the air is heavy, warmer than outside, thick with the scent of straw turned sour from the heat of sleeping beasts. And something else, too. The muffled hush of a man's voice, a woman's breath catching in her throat, the rustle of skirts bunched up around clumsy hands. It's not love, not really. Not the sweet songs the minstrel hums on the road, or the tender promises scribbled on hidden parchment. This is something sharper, rushed, hungry, the edge of fear slicing through the warmth like a blade drawn quick and hard. Picture her, Marion, her hair loose, spilling over the collar of her coarse shift, cheeks flushed from more than the cold. And him, not her husband, but the shepherd who watches the same fields by day, who slipped her a wink when they passed in the lane, who murmured just enough to lure her here tonight, pressed between bales of hay while the barn cat slinks past with its tail held high. He smells of sheep and old ale, but right now she doesn't care. Not while her heart gallops, so loud she swears it'll wake the crows in the rafters. But here's the catch. It's never really safe, is it? Because the husband, Will, comes back early. The ale ran out at the tavern quicker than he thought, or maybe the gossip he caught there needled him until the warmth of the fire turned cold in his belly. Now his boots crunch through the rime on the yard, heavy and deliberate, the kind of steps that know exactly what they'll find. A dog barks once from the byre. The barn owl shifts on the beam, feathers fluffed in the dark. Inside, Marion freezes, eyes wide, hand pressed to the shepherd's chest. They hold their breath together as the latch clatters. Picture Will broad-shouldered, hair damp with fog, the stink of stale ale clinging to his cloak. His hand closes around the lantern, the flame flickering as he lifts it high. The barn door swings wide, a creak that might as well be the crack of doom. Light spills over straw, tools, the matted shape of a bed made in haste. His eyes find them at once. Two figures tangled like foxes in a snare, caught by the neck in the worst kind of trap. His mouth twists, not a shout, not yet. Just the silence of a man deciding what part of his pride to slice off first. Marion scrambles to her feet, hair falling in her eyes, skirts half-hitched. She tries to speak. You can almost hear it. The stumble of excuses, the plea that might land soft enough to keep her throat clear of the rope come Sunday. But Will doesn't look at her. Not yet. He stares at the shepherd, his neighbor since boyhood, the same man who helped him mend the roof last spring when the hail cracked the thatch. Betrayal tastes different when it's a friend. The shepherd's mouth opens some half-hearted lie, a claim it was the ale, it was the moon, it was the devil in the hedgerow. But his words curdle in the frost between them. Will sets the lantern down, steady, careful, the flame trembling against the draft. His hand drifts to the hatchet propped by the door, the one meant for chopping kindling before dawn. Imagine the hush that fills the barn then, the animals shifting in their stalls, the drip of meltwater from the rafters. A heartbeat caught between flight and violence. Does he swing? Does he shout? Does he drag them out by their hair to the village green, where the stocks wait hungry for flesh and shame? Or does he smile, that slow, empty smile that promises this sin won't find its reckoning in front of a crowd, but somewhere quieter? A slip on the river path. A shepherd who doesn't come home from tending ewes on the far pasture. A wife who wakes to find the broth tastes of something bitter, her belly twisting until she forgets how to speak. We'll never know, because the barn door swings closed again, the frost swallows up their gasps, the owl settles back into its feathers. By dawn, Marion will lie awake beside her husband, staring at the thatch overhead, every creak of the wind a question she can't bear to answer. And the shepherd? Maybe he'll run. Maybe he'll stay. Either way, the village will talk, but they'll never know the whole story. They'll only know what they see. And what they see, they'll spread like seeds on the winter wind. So, hush now. Step out of the barn with me, boots brushing frost off the grass, breath steaming like the ghosts of all those secrets pressed into haylofts. Next, we'll drift down the riverbank at dawn, where lovers used to meet with kisses soft as mist, but sometimes The reeds remember more than just promises. Sometimes they remember murder. Picture this: the river curling lazy and black under a pale dawn sky. Mist slides across its skin like a ghost that's forgotten its own name, drifting low through reeds that hiss and bow when the wind nudges them awake. The ground is soft here, a spill of mud and rotting leaves, the squelch of your boots leaving marks that vanish by afternoon when the sun leans in close. Listen, hear that? A single frog croaking under the rushes, the flap of a heron's wings lifting off into the gray. It's quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your heartbeat sound too loud in your ears. But it wasn't quiet last night. Not when they came here. Picture them. Two figures stumbling through the orchard first, shoes scuffing over fallen apples, breath misting under the low-hanging branches. A girl in a rough wool cloak. Ellen, they call her, though behind her back it's that one with the quick laugh and quicker skirts. And him, Jory, the miller's son, broad-shouldered but soft in the belly, the smell of grain dust and yeast forever caught in his cuffs. They're not new to this path. They've crept here before, lips bruised sweet with cider and sin, hands tangled in each other's hair while the village sleeps. They think the river will keep their secrets. But last night was different. Ellen's breath fogged the cold air as she tugged him down the bank, giggling when his boots slipped on a slick patch of moss. Her laughter turned sharp when he wouldn't promise what she wanted, that he'd tell his father, that he'd leave the girl he's betrothed to in the next hamlet over. Promises, what good are they out here under the moon that can't be bribed or shamed? He kissed her instead, to hush the argument, lips pressed hard, her fingers fisted in the collar of his coat. But love made in the open-air tastes of mud and lies. Somewhere up the path, someone watched, a shadow leaning against an old willow tree, broad arms folded, breath slow as a wolf's before it leaps. Perhaps it was the betrothed girl herself, shawl drawn tight against the night, eyes wide and wild as an owl's. Perhaps it was a brother, or a husband she never told him about, or just a jealous neighbor who'd had enough of the orchard's giggles and secrets. No one knows the whole story, but they know how it ended, because at dawn, the river showed its teeth. It always does. Imagine the village boys, the ones sent down to fill buckets for the day's wash, stumbling on the shape half caught in the reeds. A wool cloak, soaked and dark, drifting like an old banner torn loose from its post. The boys freeze, buckets forgotten, feet sinking into the mud as they see the pale curve of an arm, fingers that still clutch at nothing, as if they might pull her back into the night that let her down. Jory's name is on every tongue by noon. He's gone, vanished up the path before the crows could pick apart the dawn. Some say he ran north, clutching a purse stuffed with the miller's silver. Others say they found his cap snagged on a thorn bush, a smear of red too bright to be berries. And Ellen? She stays where she is, hair drifting like riverweed, mouth open to the reeds that hush her secrets down into the silt. The villagers gather on the bank, skirts lifted against the muck, boots squelching in the shallows as they whisper behind their hands. No stocks this time, no drums, no jeering crowd. Just the cold slap of water closing over what's left of the orchard giggles and the cider kisses. By nightfall, a makeshift cross leans crooked by the bend in the river. A handful of pebbles marks where they laid her, the ones who dared to touch that water, who felt it slip under their skin like a promise that betrayal always costs more than you think. They say if you stand here on a clear night, you can still hear her laugh, drifting up from the reeds when the wind shifts just so. Or maybe it's just the rush of the river telling the same story over and over, a warning dressed up as a lullaby for anyone foolish enough to think they're the first to hide a sin in the mud. So, hush now, brush the silt from your boots, feel the chill of that river's breath crawl up your spine. We'll leave Ellen to her reeds, her jealous ghost wandering the orchard paths while the village girls whisper to each other to keep away from smooth-talking miller's sons. Next, we'll step into the smoky warmth of a cottage where the midwife waits, a basket of herbs on her lap, a secret on her tongue, because not every scandal dies in the river. Some secrets slip through the womb instead. Picture this: a low cottage at the very edge of the village, half sunk into the slope of a hill, as if the earth itself has tried to swallow it and failed. Its roof sags under the weight of sodden thatch. Herbs hang in ragged bunches from every rafter: sage, mugwort, yarrow, their scents swirling in the warmth like gossip that never quite settles. Inside, the fire glows thick and lazy in the hearth, throwing shadows across shelves cluttered with clay jars and greasy candles. A woman sits on a stool by the flames, the midwife. They call her Maud in daylight, Mother Maud when they want her kindness, Witch Maud when they want someone to blame. Her hair is a cloud of wiry gray, pinned back from a face that's seen too many births, too many deaths, and all the quiet sins that swell in between. Picture her gnarled fingers, yellowed at the tips from grinding roots that no good wife should know how to use. Picture her sharp eyes, squinting at the bundle of linen in her lap, a basket lined with scraps of old cloth and straw, herbs nestled within like a snake coiled in a cradle. She waits, because they always come, when the moon is high and the dogs are too tired to bark, when the cold squeezes their lungs until they knock, soft as a thief, on her crooked door. Tonight, it's a girl, maybe 16 summers old, hair hidden under a rough hood pulled so low you can't see her tears until she steps into the firelight. She smells of rain-soaked earth and panic. Her hands flutter at her belly, as if to press it flat, as if to will the truth back down into her bones where it can't betray her. Maud doesn't ask for the story. She knows it already. The orchard path, the promise of coins for her mother's dowry, the sweet taste of cider kisses that curdle in the belly weeks later. She sees it all in the girl's bitten lips and the raw skin under her eyes, where she's scrubbed the shame away 100 times. And the name she whispers, she'll keep that, tuck it deep under her tongue like a seed pressed into winter soil. Imagine Maud bustling about her cluttered shelves, clay jars popping open with dry clicks, powders drifting into a battered wooden bowl. Pennyroyal, tansy, a pinch of rue, each bitter leaf a promise, each ground petal a prayer that the secret will slip away quietly before dawn. The girl sits on a rough stool, legs trembling, eyes fixed on the floorboards where the rushes rustle with every draft. She jumps when Maud presses the cup in her hand, warm, bitter steam curling up her nose. Her fingers tremble, spilling a drop on her skirt. Maud hushes her, a low hum, old as the river, older than the orchard, older than the lies men whisper behind hayloft doors. "You'll rest here tonight," Maud says, her voice soft but sharp enough to slice through the girl's panic. She pulls a tattered blanket around her shoulders, presses a sprig of lavender under her nose to smother the smell of the herbs. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, or maybe it's the ghost of Ellen laughing through the reeds. Maud doesn't flinch. She's heard worse than ghosts. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the belly softens by dawn, the shame washed away with tears and prayers that Maud never repeats to another soul. Sometimes the girl slips home before the cock crows, no one the wiser but her mother, who eyes her a little too long over the wash tub, lips pressed thin with relief and resentment. And sometimes, sometimes the potion fails, the heartbeat stays, and the secret grows stubborn under winter shawls and extra layers of cloth. And when the baby comes, Maud is there too, hands slick with blood and soap, eyes narrowed as she cuts the cord on a new mouth that might someday ask, "Who was he, mother?" A question that will curdle every pot of soup for years to come. Picture Maud at the hearth long after the girl's gone, cup washed clean and set on the shelf. She rubs the ache from her wrists, counts her silver, coins that will buy her no protection when the Reeves' wife spits the word, which like rotten fruit in spring. Still she waits. The next knock will come soon enough. Another girl, another orchard, another secret twisting in the dark. Because as long as people slip through hedgerows and make promises under moonlight, Maud's door will never stay shut for long. So, hush now. Slip out of the warmth with me. Feel the cold catch at your ankles. We'll leave Maud with her herbs and her hushes and the ghosts that knock when no one else dares. Next, we climb high again, up into the castle walls, where arrow slits become eyes, and the servants learn that no scandal stays hidden when you're paid to wash the stains out of silk sheets. Picture this, a castle perched like a stone hawk above the village, its towers stabbing into the night sky while the wind snarls around its battlements. Inside, the air is heavy with damp torch smoke, the musk of burning tallow, and the lingering sweetness of perfumes that fail to mask what happens when velvet drapes are pulled shut. You see, the nobles think these walls keep them safe, that betrayal hides behind silken bed hangings and heavy doors barred tight against the drafts. But castles are alive, and they watch. And the eyes that see the most are not crowned in gold, but wrapped in rough linen, hands raw from lye and winter water. Picture one of them now, Alice, a chambermaid barely 15 summers old. Her hair is plaited tight to keep the lice out. Her hands are red and cracked from scrubbing flagstones and emptying chamber pots that smell worse than any stable. But her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, always flitting toward the smallest flutter of a curtain or the hush of footsteps in a corridor long after the lamps should be snuffed. Alice is everywhere, because the servants must be. At dawn, she pulls back the canopy drapes while the lady pretends to sleep, the smell of another man's skin still clinging to her hair. At dusk, she shakes the rushes from the floor, finding the stray trinkets that slip from lovers' pockets. A ring with the wrong family crest, a handkerchief embroidered with an initial no husband should wear close to his heart. Imagine her at the arrow slit, a narrow gap in the thick stone, just wide enough to pour in a slice of dawn or dusk. Sometimes she stands there, pretending to sweep, when really she's watching the courtyard far below. A night lingering too long at the kitchen door. A stable boy slipping a basket of apples to a blushing maid who should be helping in the scullery. She sees it all. The way sin ripples through the fortress like wine spilled across a white cloth. And what does she do with these scraps? Well, Alice has learned the oldest trick of all. Secrets are more precious than silver. One whispered name can earn her better shoes from the Reeves' wife, in trade for a hint about who's warming whose bed when the lord's away hunting. A small lie, that the lady's new gown was paid for with coin from a visiting baron, might buy her mother a new wool cloak before the frost sets in. But here's the twist. These secrets are double-edged knives. One slip can get you quicker than any dagger. The chambermaids know that too. They trade what they hear like stolen bread, but they guard the deadliest bits for a moment when they might need to save their own neck. And sometimes, those secrets don't stay whispered. They get sewn into the castle itself. Picture this. A tapestry hanging on the ladies' chamber wall. Knights in battle. Dragons coiled around saintly virgins. All stitched by candlelight by girls like Alice. Each knot and curl of wool is more than just art. It's a testament. Proof that the eyes behind the needles saw too much. Maybe a figure that looks suspiciously like the Lord's steward kneeling at the wrong lady's feet. Maybe a swirl of red thread at the hem, that marks a bloodline no one will claim. The lady never notices, but Alis does. And so does the cook's boy, the stable hand, the other girls who lie awake in the servants' loft, giggling and trembling and wondering what they do with such a weapon. And sometimes secrets slip out where they shouldn't. A careless scullery maid, drunk on stolen wine, brags to the butcher's boy about what she saw at the tower stair. A page boy trading rumors with a minstrel passing through, who carries that song all the way to the next village, where it blooms like poison ivy across the hedgerows. By the time it curls back to the castle gates, it's twice as sharp, thrice as dangerous. Meanwhile, Alis keeps her head down, her lips sealed, mostly. She watches the lady's face when a letter arrives from the Lord at War. How her eyes flick to the window where the captain of the guard stands too close. She watches the way the captain's gloves disappear behind the lady's cushion. How they're found a week later by the cook's daughter, who tells Alis, who tucks that knowledge away like a coin sewn into her hem. Because in the end, the castle walls are not just stone. They're stories wrapped tight, waiting to slip through the arrow slits when the wind blows cold enough. And the watchful eyes? They'll sell you for a warm cloak and a crust of bread, or keep your secrets buried for years until they're worth spilling in the dark. So, hush now. Step back from that narrow window with me. Leave the rushes, the cold stone, the secrets stitched into dragons' tails and saints' halos. Next, we'll stand in the grand hall where lords and ladies dance beneath painted beams, where a single stray kiss can topple a noble house. Because when a highborn heart strays, the whole kingdom feels the bruise. Picture this. A hall so wide your footsteps fade into its shadows before they reach the far wall. The ceiling arches high overhead, timber beams painted with faded saints and half-forgotten crests. Chandeliers drip tallow onto rushes scattered fresh to hide the smell of sweat and spilled wine. There's music here, a lute, a fiddle, the low hum of voices raised in song, weaving through the air like silk ribbons, tangling around secrets too heavy for parchment. At the center of it all, Lady Isolde. Picture her leaning back on a carved bench draped in fox pelts, her gown a river of deep green velvet that pools at her slippers. Her hair is a crown of dark braids, pinned so tight it pulls her temples smooth. To the unknowing eye, she looks calm, eyes half-lidded, fingers drumming the carved arm of her chair in time with the music. But if you were close enough, if you stood behind the tapestry and held your breath, you'd see the truth glint in her eyes whenever they drift across the hall. There, near the hearth, stands Sir Renard, the reason her heart hammers like hooves on the courtyard cobbles. He's young for a knight, not yet 30 summers, armor still shining more from polish than from true war. His voice is soft, his laugh sharper than his sword. And when he tips his head back to drink from the goblet the steward fills and refills, his eyes find Lady Isolde's and hold. Too long. Always too long. The court knows, of course. They always do. The whispers have sprouted like weeds through the tapestries, carried by pages slipping notes under doorways, by handmaids pretending to air out linens. They say Sir Renard's shadow crosses her chambered door on nights when the Lord hunts boar 2 counties away. They say her chambermaid has found boots, muddy, reeking of the stables, tucked behind the lady's chest, hidden like a child's sin. They say they've been seen in the orchard at dawn, hands tangled in each other's cloaks, lips parting before they remember who they are and what they stand to lose. But here's the thing about noble blood. Its stain is too bright to hide forever. And when it spills, it splashes wide. Picture the Lord, Isolde's husband, seated at the high table, ringed with banners that show his lines stretching back to conquerors long turned to bone. His shoulders are broad, neck thick with age and power. but his eyes flick like a hawk's whenever the music dips and the hush slithers in. He knows. Of course he knows. But betrayal at this height is not settled with a slap or a curse. It is a chessboard played in letters sealed with wax, alliances promised in candlelit corners, the careful hand laid on a dagger's hilt under a velvet sleeve. When noble blood strays, whole counties shiver. A bastard born from stolen kisses can topple a claim. A whispered scandal can spark a feud that eats harvests and homes and turns brothers to corpses on a frosty battlefield. So the Lord waits, watching Sir Renard drink, watching Lady Isolde's fingers tremble when she lifts her goblet. He counts the hush between the lutenist's notes, the flicker of her eyes toward the door. He counts the cost. Sometimes, when the shame is too large to bury in bribes and prayers, the affair is paid for in blood. A hunting accident, they say, when Sir Renard does not return from the woods. His body found trampled by his own horse, the bruises blooming like flowers under his chainmail. Or maybe it's poison, slipped into the last goblet of wine by a cook who'll vanish to the coast before the Lord ever thinks to question. Or, if the gossip is too loud and the shame too fresh, there is a trial, a show made for the whole castle to taste the bitterness of betrayal, a public stripping of rank, a broken sword laid across the knight's back, a wife cloistered in a cold stone tower, her gowns cut apart, her hair hacked short, her prayers never quite loud enough to drown out the rustle of scandal in the corridors. And yet, sometimes there is mercy, a deal made in the hush behind the Lord's chambers. The affair is swallowed by distance. The knight sent to a border outpost to bleed for the same lord he betrayed. The lady kept at her husband's side like a jewel cracked, but too precious to discard. But the castle never forgets. Alis the chambermaid will remember the stain on Lady Isolde's hem. The steward will remember the extra wine goblets fetched in the hush of midnight. And the servants' children will giggle about it years later while scrubbing rushes from the hall. A memory turned fable turned lesson. Beware whose lips you taste in the torchlight. The higher you rise, the longer you have to fall. So, hush now. Leave the grand hall behind. The music, the torches, the hush between verses where kingdoms crumble for the price of a kiss. Slip with me down to the mead hall, where another cup waits, but this one might hold more than honeyed wine. Next, we'll taste a potion that twists love into vengeance, because when a jealous heart brews revenge, the sweetest drink can rot your soul. Picture this. A rough wooden table in a lean-to shack just beyond the castle walls. Nothing more than planks nailed together under a sloping roof that weeps rain onto the muddied earth below. Inside, the air is thick with the sharp tang of herbs crushed in a mortar. Rosemary, wormwood, wild garlic still wet with dew. A single stub of candle flickers on a barrel lid, throwing shadows up the rough walls that dance like ghosts waiting to be invited in. Here sits old Breathe, a hedge witch to some, a wise woman to others, and to those who fear her the most, poison in a crooked smile. Her back is bent from years of gathering roots under moonlight. Her fingers stain brown from bark and berries that don't grow anywhere a good priest would bless. She hums to herself, a low tune that seems to coil around the rafters like wood smoke. And before her, on the table, sits a cup of mead, sweet, golden, swirling with something darker than honey. Picture the young man who stands before her, his hands cracked from working the fields, a smear of dried blood across his knuckles where he punched a wall, or a door, or maybe the face of the man he suspects. His eyes shift in the candlelight, too wide, too wet. He says her name too soft, as if the wind might hear it and tattle to the priest. It's for her, he says. The words stutter out of him like a rusted gate swinging on its hinges. Just so she'll not look at him again. So she'll remember who feeds her, who carries the pails and cuts the wood. Just enough to bind her to me. Old Bria chuckles, a sound like dry leaves crushed underfoot. She lifts the cup, sniffing its steam, eyes half closed as if reading the boy's sin in the swirl of herbs inside. Binding's one thing, she rasps, voice rough as bark. But binding's just the leash. What about the bite? He shifts, feet scuffing straw on the floor. There's a flash in his eyes, something darker than bruised pride. A bite too, he whispers. So if she tries to stray, she'll feel it. Deep like a rot. Just enough that she'll remember she's mine. Bria nods once. She dips her spoon, old, carved from elderwood, stained from stirring too many truths best left unsaid. She adds a pinch more of something, bitter black seeds that smell like burnt dreams and dead flowers. She stirs it slow, the mead catching the light like golden silk twisting around poison. When she lifts it, the scent is sweet, honey and herbs, like any wedding toast might taste. No one would know, not until the binding took hold, not until the bite sank deep. Picture her leaning close, so close the boy feels her breath warm on his cheek. 3 drops in her cup, she murmurs. 3, no more, when the moon's thin, and if she turns to another, she'll feel it twist her bones from inside. She'll dream of your name, and she'll wake tasting blood. His hands tremble as he takes the cup, not to drink, but to hold the potion's promise tight against his chest like a lover he can't bear to lose. In the morning, he'll pour it into her mug of warm cider. Watch her lips touch the rim. Watch the sweet honey slip down her throat while he smiles, wide and soft as butter. She'll feel warm first, then soft, then heavy with the weight of him pressed into her dreams. But here's the thing about these potions. They never bind just the heart they're meant for. They bind the giver too, tighter than a noose around a jealous neck. For every drop of sweetness swallowed, there's a bruise that blooms somewhere in the soul, dark and sticky as old mead gone sour in the barrel. Old Bria knows this. She's seen it before. The boy who comes back next year, eyes wild with grief when the girl he claimed chokes on her own breath in the night. The wife who clutches her belly when the child won't come, or comes wrong, all because a jealous cup bound her womb as tight as her heart. But she never tells him that part. Instead, she hums him out the door, the mead wrapped tight in a rag, the last as coin dropped into her apron pocket. And when the wind rattles the shack that night, old Bria smiles in her sleep, dreams of all the secrets that dance in the steam of her potions, all the heart she's tied up in knots that can never be cut loose. So, hush now. Step careful. Don't brush your cloak against the doorframe on your way out. Leave the candle burning low, the herbs wilting in the basket, the boy stumbling back to the path with sweetness and venom swirling in the cup against his chest. Next, we'll wander down a muddy lane where a jilted lover stands at a crossroads, whispering curses into the dark. Because when love curdles, the tongue turns to hexes and the nights grow long with spite. Picture this, a lonely crossroads at the edge of a wood, where 2 rutted lanes meet in a twist of muddy earth trampled by hooves and heavy boots. A broken milestone leans drunkenly near the ditch, its chiseled words half swallowed by moss and time. Above it, an old oak hunches its shoulders against the wind, its branches black and bare in the weak spill of moonlight. The air smells of wet leaves, crushed underfoot, a hint of wood smoke drifting from some distant hearth the cursed will never share again. There, under that oak, stands a figure wrapped in a tattered cloak. A woman, or maybe a man. The shape shifts in the dark because anger makes us all look the same once our hearts curdle to spite. Tonight, let's call her Marin, a name carried in 100 village songs, none of them sung kindly anymore. Her hair hangs loose, soaked by drizzle that's begun to needle the earth. One hand clutches a bundle of twigs tied with a scrap of ribbon, bright red, faded now, but once wrapped around a gift pressed in her palm by the man whose promises have turned her tongue to ash. Picture her voice as she speaks, low, bitter, each word sucked through clenched teeth. No grand incantations, no priest Latin muttered behind locked doors. Just old words, half remembered from her mother's mother's mother. The kind of hex that drips off the tongue like spoiled milk when the belly is full of betrayal. She presses the twig bundle against the milestone, jams it into a crack where moss has grown soft and black. She spits, once, twice, watching her breath coil in the night air. Then the words slip out, quiet but sharp as the briars that tug at her skirts. May his tongue dry in his mouth when he lies to her. May her womb turn cold as the stone I stand on. May every kiss taste of salt and sorrow. May they dream of me, my eyes behind every door, my voice in every hush of the wind. Her fingers tighten until the twigs snap, the ribbon drooping limp as a dead snake. She knows curses are tricky things. They slip sideways if you're not careful. Sometimes they slide back under your own skin, nestle in your ribs, whisper that maybe you deserve the betrayal after all. But Maren doesn't care, not tonight. Tonight the rage is too bright, the grief too raw. And the crossroads? It's a hungry place for wishes made of hate. Travelers pass through at dawn, wheels splashing in the mud. They won't see the ribbon tucked in a milestone's crack. Or maybe they will, and they'll cross themselves, spit 3 times over the left shoulder, and pray their own heart doesn't end up their next. Because the village knows, though they won't say it to her face. They'll cross the lane when they see Maren at the well, her skirts still damp with bramble dew. They'll hush their children when they ask why she never smiles anymore, why her bread goes stale on the windowsill uneaten, why she mutters to herself when the church bells toll at dusk. And the man, her faithless lover, will he feel it? Maybe he'll wake one night, his new wife's hand warm on his chest, but his dreams crawling with the shape of Maren's eyes in the hedge outside. Maybe the cows will birth stillborn calves for a season, and the hens will lay eggs streaked with blood. Or maybe nothing will happen at all. Maybe the real curse is knowing the betrayal is done and cannot be undone, no matter how sharp the words or how old the magic. Still, Maren leaves her offering, tangled in the milestone's crack like a thorn that won't pull free. She lifts her hood against the drizzle, turns her face to the wind, and trudges back toward the village where no one waits up for her. Where the fire she tended for him is now just a cold hearth, the ashes mocking her as they drift up the flue. Some say curses like hers slip down the lane, catch in the thatch of cottages that never wronged her, leave a stain in the milk and a shiver in the cradle. Others say the crossroads keeps them tucked tight in its roots, a knot of bitterness and bramble that will bloom black flowers come spring. And when they bloom, the children know better than to pick them, because some grief is best left sleeping under the oak where it was first wept out into the dark. So, hush now. Leave the milestone behind, the ribbon fluttering soft as a dead bird's wing in the breeze. Step careful. Don't snag your heart on that hedge of old words and spite. Next, we'll wander into the barns and haylofts where stolen kisses still happen, where midnight packs are made with mud on the knees and straw in the hair. Because not every affair ends with a curse. Some burn on, sweet and reckless, until the dawn finds them out. Picture this, a barn that slouches at the edge of the village, its beams older than the tale of the Lord's great-grandfather, its thatch patched with so many layers it looks like an old man's thinning hair. Inside, the air is warm, warmer than any cottage hearth, thick with the sharp, sweet smell of hay piled high to the rafters. Dust motes drift in the lantern glow like tiny ghosts come to listen to hover, to tattle if they dared. Now look closer, up the rickety ladder nailed to the beams, worn smooth by 100 boots. They are half buried in the hay, lie two shapes. A girl, a farmhand's daughter, hair loose, cheeks pink with more than the cold night air. And a boy, a cooper's son, old enough to mend barrels for the tavern, but not old enough to know how to keep his voice from cracking when he calls her name in the dark. They lie close, so close their breath steams together, warm enough to melt the frost that crusts the hay just outside the door. His coat is half tugged from his shoulders, her hands tucked under it, knuckles raw from the climb up the ladder. They giggle, not the high, cruel giggle of orchard secrets or alehouse shame, but the soft sound that slips out when fear is swept away by the sweetness of being wanted. Imagine the sounds, the shuffle of hay as their limbs tangle, the squeak of the rafters when they shift too suddenly, hearts drumming in sync, the muffled hush of promises, I'll marry you come May. He breathes, though he has no coin to speak of yet. Only a strip of land he hopes to inherit if the taxman looks the other way. She hums into his chest, half believing, half afraid. She knows what happens when the hayloft's heat fades and the morning's chill finds them out. She knows the rush of village tongues, the weight of a belly that might swell before the wedding clothes are stitched. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, there's only this. His hands trembling against the rough hem of her shift, her fingers brushing straw from his hair, the soft catch of a kiss that tastes of dry hay and hope. Above them, the beams groan with the memory of 100 stolen hours like this. Long before they were born, long after they're gone. The barn always remembers. It's seen young men swear oaths in the hush before dawn, only to slip their boots on and walk away, come harvest. It's heard girls weep when their sweethearts vanish into the trees, promises dropping from their tongues like husks in the wind. But it's also kept these moments. The warmth of two bodies pressed close, the hush of secrets stitched into hay that no priest's sermon can burn away. Because not every scandal is born of spite. Some cling to the ribs like a blessing you dare not speak aloud. Some slip down from the hayloft in the half-light, skirts dusty, boots muddy, a promise pressed quick to the lips before slipping out the back door. Picture them now, drifting back into sleep, a shallow, foolish sleep broken by the clatter of a farmhand's boots below. They freeze, hearts hammering, eyes wide in the lantern's dying glow. A fox yips in the orchard, the same orchard that's heard too many lies already. The boy presses his mouth to the girl's ear. Next time, we'll find a better place. She nods, but her hand curls his shirt like a question she can't yet ask. What if this is the only place we ever have? Morning will come soon. It always does. She'll slip back home with straw in her hair and a smile too soft for the village to believe. He'll run his fingers through the hay one last time, gather his boots, climb down the ladder that groans with every careless step. But the hayloft keeps their secret for now. The rafters hold their laughter, their half-sworn oaths, the warmth of the love that might yet survive the sharp bite of gossip, the cold slap of a wedding not yet blessed. Because sometimes the barn gives more than it takes, a hiding place for a heart too tender to be caught on a village tongue. So, hush now. Let them doze while the lantern sputters out. Slip your boots back on. Shake the straw from your shoulders. Next, we'll drift back to the manor's edge, where the orchard trees lean close and the village girls gather under the boughs to carve their names into bark. Because when hearts ache, they mark the world just to prove they were here. They loved, and they dared the darkness to remember. Picture this, an orchard heavy with secrets. Not apples, not pears, not cherries, but the hush of 100 footsteps pressed into the muddy path between the trunks. In summer, The trees bow under fruit that ripens too fast under the eager tongues of lovers who meet at dusk. In winter, they stand bare, bark slick with frost, branches black veins scratching the bruised sky. And yet, they remember. You can see it if you lean in close. The shallow grooves cut into the trunks by knives too dull to fell, but sharp enough to mark a promise no tongue dared speak aloud. Imagine the girls first, skirts tucked up from a mud, fingers red with cold, a small blade borrowed from a brother's boot. They huddle close, breath steaming into the dark, giggling as they press the knife to the bark. One letter at a time. A J for Jacob, a T for Thomas, a swirl for good luck, a half-formed heart they promise to finish when he swears he's hers for good. The cuts weep sap, amber beads that glisten in a lantern's flicker if they're foolish enough to bring a lantern at all. The air smells of moss and damp wood, but beneath that, the sharper scent of fear. Because a carved name is as good as a confession if the wrong eyes catch it before the sap dries. Sometimes the boys come too, though they laugh at the girls for it, spit between their boots, and say it's folly to trust bark with the same lies they're too cowardly to keep. But when the orchard's dark and the hayloft too cold, they run their thumb over a trunk anyway. Their own blade pressing deep into the belly of a tree that's seen more betrayals than any priest. J plus M, E and A, forever. Mine, just that mine. As if carving it deep enough will make it true. And here's the curious part. The orchard remembers. Long after the giggles fade and the rush of young blood cools under a marriage bed, not nearly so sweet as straw, the names remain. The bark swells around them, grows knotted and rough, tries to swallow the scars like a secret pressed under a tongue. But you can still find them if you know where to look. A crooked heart half lost under lichen. A pair of initials nearly hidden by a low branch that split in a storm but refused to die. Some marks so fresh they still ooze resin that smells of sorrow and honey. Picture a girl, older now, skirts longer, hair pin neat. She stands at dawn beneath the tree that bears her name and his, the bark cold under her palm. She traces it like a prayer she no longer believes. The boy is long gone, maybe to war, maybe just across the lane to another girl with prettier ribbons and a father with more pigs to barter. But the mark stays. It laughs at her when she passes the orchard with her new husband, who never asked why she flinches when he says they'll plant apple trees by the barn come spring. It whispers to her children when they chase chickens through the grass. Tiny hands slapping the same trunks she once leaned against to catch her breath between kisses. And still, new names appear. No matter how many boys run, how many girls grow bitter and toss the old knife into the thatch. Because hope is the only sin we never stop committing. The orchard knows. It bears its scars proudly. A crooked ledger of promises made with wine-warm breath and hearts thumping too loud to hear the wind's warning. Some say if you press your ear to the bark on a summer night, you can hear the echoes, laughter, tears, the scrape of a blade cutting letters that will outlive them all. 100 confessions wrapped in sap and frost, and prayers that next time will be different. Next time he'll stay. Next time she'll say yes. Next time the orchard will bloom only sweetness. So hush now, brush the sap from your palm. Feel how sticky it clings, like the memory of a name you swore you'd forget. Let's slip away through the rows before the crows come cawing at dawn, mocking these bark-bound secrets with their black, sharp-tongued laughter. Next, we'll sit in the hush of an old graveyard where some lovers lie side by side, and some, betrayed to the last breath, rest forever with curses buried deeper than their bones. Picture this, an ancient graveyard huddled against the north wall of the village church. The stones lean like old men dozing off during sermons, some cracked by frost, some half swallowed by weeds that claw through the dirt as if they're trying to tug the dead back up for one more word. The grass is patchy, speckled with moss and dry bracken that crunches under your boots if you're foolish enough to visit after dusk. Some say the church bell never truly stops ringing here, that its echo trembles through the bones beneath your feet, reminding the dead they've still got stories to tell. And there, in a crooked roan near the yew that splits itself open every spring, lie two stones side by side but tilted away from each other ever so slightly, like a husband and wife who'd turned their backs long before the worms came. The names carved into the flaking slate have worn soft under rain and centuries of whispers, but the villagers remember them well enough. Isabella, the blacksmith's daughter, hair like flax and a laugh like clinking iron. And beside her, Thomas, the Reeves' son, clever hands, quicker tongue, a smile that charmed the priest's wife and the brewer's daughter alike. They said they were meant for each other, or so they swore, pressed up against the yew tree one midsummer's eve when the ale ran sweet and the sky wouldn't darken no matter how late it grew. But the blacksmith's daughter was promised to another, a farmer's son with broad shoulders and a plot of land fat enough to keep her children in bread. And Thomas? He'd already gotten the brewer's daughter round in the belly, though he'd never confessed it sober. When the orchard whispers turned to shouting, they fled, two silhouettes slipping through the hedge, breathless, foolish, their pockets rattling with the coin they'd stolen from fathers who'd never forgive them. They made it as far as the river bend, the same reeds that cradle the bones of so many broken promises. Some say it was an accident, a slip, a swirl of water that tugged at her skirts until the cold crept in her mouth and lungs. Others swear Thomas held her under, panicked, weeping, afraid of what they'd return to if they turned back empty-handed. When he dragged her onto the bank, blue-lipped and still, he didn't run. He sat with her all night, the water licking at her toes, the dawn turning her hair to spun silver. And when the constables found him, he went quiet as a lamb, let them bind his wrists, never once spoke in his own defense. They buried her first, weeping and wailing about lost innocence and the wages of sin. They buried him a week later, after the rope, after the hush that fell over the village when the trapdoor swung open. No priest wanted his grave near hers, but the blacksmith's wife, half mad with grief, demanded it. She planted their stones side by side under the yew. Let the roots judge them. She spat, voice cracking. Let the worms decide if love was enough. Sometimes lovers slip through the churchyard gate at dusk, hand in hand, giggling at the old tales, daring each other to press an ear to the stones and listen. They say if you stand between Isabella and Thomas, you'll feel the warmth in the soil, like their bodies still burn for each other, sin bound so deep that you can't choke it out. Others say you'll feel nothing but cold, the chill of promises drowned in a river that never gives back what it takes. And when the wind pushes the yew's branches against the leaning stones, it creaks like a warning. Some secrets you take to your grave. Some secrets become the grave. Picture an old widow kneeling there at dawn, basket of flowers on her arm, the frost nipping her knuckles as she tucks dried rosemary under Isabella's stone. She mutters a prayer, but she's not sure who she prays to anymore, the God inside the church walls or the restless bones beneath her knees. She remembers because her mother remembered, because her mother's mother wouldn't let her forget. In a village, we guard these stories like embers, not to burn ourselves, but to keep our hearts warm enough to hope we'll do better when temptation comes scratching at our door. So, hush now. Stand with me at the edge of the graveyard. Feel the damp creeping into your boots, the weight of all these sins pressing down through the cracked slate. Step careful as we leave the yew behind. Don't snag your cloak on the roots that snake up through the soil. Next, we'll wander back through the village lanes to the threshold of a shuttered cottage where an old wife waits alone, rocking and humming lullabies for the child her wandering husband fathered elsewhere, because betrayal leaves echoes in the cradle, too. Picture this: a cottage wedged between two ancient hedgerows, its walls patched with wattle and daub, its doorway just high enough for a man to stoop his head when he comes home late, if he comes home at all. The thatch is black with age, patched in places where crows once tore it for their nests. A single candle flickers in the window, throwing a thin tongue of light across the frozen garden, catching the shape of a small wooden cradle pushed near the hearth. It's empty, of course. Has been for weeks now. Inside, you'll find her, the wife. Let's call her Elsbeth. Hair streaked with gray she never had last winter. Eyes sunk into shadows that no church bell can ring out. She sits in her rocker, the one her father carved for her dowry. A simple thing, now worn smooth at the arms where her hands grip when the wind rattles the shutters. She hums under her breath, a lullaby no babe will ever coo back to her. But she hums it all the same, as if each note might stitch shut the hole torn through her heart by a man who loved her first, then left her last. You see, her husband was a farmhand. Strong shoulders, a soft word at the market, a laugh that rolled through the orchard like cider poured fresh into a cup. They'd lain together under the hayloft beams before the priest's blessing, too impatient to wait for a ring when the moon turned warm and the birds sang all night. And when she swelled, she thought it proof of his love, their child, born of orchard kisses and the hush of May rain on the thatch. But spring turns to harvest, and a man's heart is easier to sway than a sapling in a storm. Another girl, younger, with hair the color of sunlit barley, caught his eye by the well one morning. A slip of a promise turned to late-night footsteps that never stopped at Elsbeth's door. The village talked, they always do, but no gossip stung sharper than the empty hush when the cradle stayed still. She'd rocked it day and night, hoping the crying might wake the man she'd wed, remind him of the life they'd made in the hush of a barn when the world felt small enough to hold together. But babes born from lies and half-kept oaths sometimes slip away before the first frost. Now the cradle sits empty, a splintered echo of everything she thought she owned. Her hands still stroke the curve of its worn sides, as if she can rub the ghost of a heartbeat back into the wood. Imagine her neighbors peeking through the cracked shutters, the blacksmith's wife muttering that grief's turned her simple, the alewife telling her boy to hush when he asks why Mistress Elsbeth rocks a cradle with nothing inside. They bring her scraps of bread, a bowl of broth gone cold by dawn when she doesn't touch it. Some whisper she's cursed, that God sealed her womb as punishment for the orchard sins that started it all. Others know better. They've watched their own husbands slip behind hedgerows, boots muddy, lips sweet with the taste of someone else's promises. They know sometimes betrayal leaves a woman with an ache deeper than any grave, one you carry inside you year after year, even when the man who planted it never comes home to water it again. Picture Elsbeth humming, her voice cracked but gentle, a song about rowan trees and bramble thorns, about love that never dies but rots slow in the roots. She hums until her eyes drift shut, the chair creaking under her weight like an old ship in a restless tide. She dreams of the orchard where she first took his hand, the hayloft where she pressed her ear to his chest to hear if his heart could hold her safe. She dreams of a child that never grew tall enough to run through the garden gate. When she wakes, the candle has burned down to a nub, the cradle still empty, the only cradle that ever will be hers. So, hush now. Step out of her doorway gentle. Don't let the cold rush in to steal what warmth she's gathered in her blanket. Leave her to the shadows, the lullaby humming soft in the thatch. Next, we'll slip back to the village green where the stocks stand empty tonight, but the stories carved into their beams still taste of blood and shame, waiting for the next fool who dares to think their secret love will never be dragged out into the sun. Picture this: the village green at dawn, mist rising from the earth in ghostly ribbons, swirling around the low stone cross at the center where children clamber when no one's looking. But today is no day for games. See there, the stocks squat and waiting. Oak beams scarred with 100 names carved deep by penitent fingers or jeering neighbors. The holes for neck and wrist stained dark where sweat and spit and tears have soaked in over the decades. The iron hinges rusted but strong enough still to hold shame tight until the gossip tires of chewing the bones. You can smell the damp. Old hay scattered underfoot to catch the piss of the accused who trembled too hard to hold it in. Some say the green itself reeks of old sin, no matter how many maypoles they dance around to bless the earth come spring. Because this patch of trampled grass remembers. It remembers the farmer's wife who knelt in the dust after her husband found her letters hidden in the grain bin. It remembers the stable boy who boasted too loud about the Lord's daughter in the orchard, who found his mouth stuffed with dung before the reeve unlocked the stocks at dusk. It remembers the lad who claimed a bastard he never fathered, then bit his tongue through from shame when the alehouse jeers turned cruel. Picture them now, the villagers gathering before the sun has cleared the treetops. Boots sinking into the wet soil, breath clouding the air, eyes sharp with that hungry gleam that only shows itself when another soul's disgrace is about to be paraded like a sow at market. A constable stands guard, cudgel tucked under his belt, but never far from his palm. The village priest lurks behind him, eyes darting from the stocks to the small knot of boys tossing pebbles at the post, waiting for the nod to turn them loose. In the tavern doorway, a young woman clutches her shawl close. Her hair tumbles loose from its pins. The same hair the gossip says the blacksmith's apprentice once buried his hands behind the forge when the fires burned low. Her cheeks blaze red in the dawn chill, but her eyes? They're cold as the iron the blacksmith hammers flat every day except Sunday. She steps forward when the constable beckons, feet dragging, a hitch in her breath when the wooden beam creaks open to bare its hungry throat. She's not crying, not yet. Shame comes in stages. First you stand stiff, shoulders square, lips pressed tight enough to draw blood. Then the spit comes, a glob from the baker's boy who thinks he's too small to matter, but big enough to sting her pride. Then the soft splat of a rotten turnip, the same one the alewife saved from a stew pot, because even slop has better purpose than forgiveness. Hours will pass like this. By dusk, her head will hang limp in the wooden brace, hair plastered to her cheeks, mouth gummy with dust and tears. Some will whisper mercy, an old man pressing a scrap of bread between her numb fingers. Others will mutter that she deserves worse, that she tempted fate by carving that foolish heart in the orchard, by letting that boy promise what his coin could never keep. The stocks listen to it all. They soak it in. Every sob, every jeer, every promise never to stray that the onlookers spit through crooked teeth before they sneak home to do the same in shadowed corners. When dusk finally drags its hem across the green, the constable's keys rattle. The beam lifts with a moan that sounds too much like a dying calf. She'll stumble when they pull her free, wrists raw, neck stiff, head bowed to hide her eyes from the children who giggle behind their mother's skirts. She'll vanish into the lanes, maybe back to her father's cottage if he'll have her, maybe to the next village if she dares try for a new name that doesn't taste of mud and rotting turnip. But the green will remember, the stocks will remember, and tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, they'll be ready again, oak beam yawning wide, iron hinges shrieking for fresh gossip to gnaw on. Because in this place, love is never just sweet. It's sticky with shame. And secrets, well, they never stay buried, do they? So, hush now. Step back from the green. Keep your boots clear of the muck and your eyes off the poor girl's raw wrists. Let the stock stand empty for one last breath before the next fool forgets how easily a kiss behind the forge can become a noose for the neck. Next, we'll slip up the hill to where the manor windows flicker with candlelight, because up there, the same betrayals drip from goblets of wine and silk sheets. And the punishment is never a rotten turnip, but a poisoned cup and a smile that says, "I forgive you," just before the blade comes down. Picture this: a grand chamber perched at the top of a stone keep, its windows narrow and draped in heavy tapestries to keep out the wind that whips at the moors. A bed stands there, massive, draped in velvet and lined with furs so thick you'd swear winter itself might die at its foot. Candles gutter in iron sconces, dripping tallow onto rushes sprinkled with dried lavender and mint. A hearth flickers low, logs hissing as sap spits into the hush. And at the far end, a long table waits, its surface gleaming with pewter plates and crystal goblets that catch the candlelight like the eyes of wolves in the dark. Imagine the lady, Marwena, they call her in the market lanes, though her husband never says her name at all anymore. She sits there, pale wrists crossed on the table, the rings on her fingers too heavy for a woman who still dreams of orchard kisses and hands tangled in her hair. Her lips, painted berry dark, hide the quiver in her breath as she watches the door swing wide on its ancient hinges. The Lord enters, boots thudding across the rushes, the iron spurs on his heels clicking like the snap of a trap about to spring shut. His eyes are small and sharp as hawk's eyes, sunk into a face that no longer remembers how to soften. Behind him trails a servant, a boy hardly older than the orchard girls who carve initials into bark by moonlight. He carries a silver flagon, its stopper carved with a snarling boar's head. The wine inside, claret as fresh blood, spiced with cloves, nutmeg, and something more. Something slipped into the flagon by trembling hands at the kitchen hearth, while the lady's chambermaid kept watch for the steward's boots creaking down the corridor. Picture it. The boy pours, careful not to splash. The wine pools in her goblet, dark and sweet. Marwena lifts it with fingers steady as frost. She smiles, a soft, thin thing that never reaches her eyes. She nods at the boy, a dismissal. He bows so deep you'd think his neck might snap if he dared look too long at the cup. And the Lord, well, he laughs. A dry chuckle that cracks the air between them like a knuckle bone snapped in two. "Poison in my cup tonight. Sweet dove," he sneers, swirling his own wine so the red clings to the crystal like blood. He thinks it's a jest, thinks his boots on the rushes, his blade at his belt, his seal on every parchment keeps him safe. But the lady just watches him over the rim of her goblet, eyes dark as the storm that gathers behind the tapestries at night. Because he's right, of course. Poison waits here, not in her cup, but in his. She tried everything first. The orchard letters, the desperate prayers to the village priest whose tongue slipped more secrets than it sealed. She tried the hush of the confessional, the hush of her own heart when his boots scuffed her chamber floor after nights spent with a kitchen girl too foolish to understand the cost. But some sins stain deeper than gossip, and some women learn that the softest revenge tastes sweetest when poured under candlelight. The Lord lifts his goblet, nose wrinkling at the spices he doesn't quite recognize. Marwena lifts hers too, sips delicately, lets the wine settle on her tongue like a memory of her mother's orchard before she was sold for a plot of land and a promise of silk. He drinks deep. His throat bobs. The candlelight glints off the gold band at his wrist. The same wrist that once pressed her face into the pillow when his anger burned hotter than the hearth. Minutes pass like lifetimes. Outside, The wind rattles the arrow slits, the moors stretching endless under the moon's thin smile. Inside, the Lord coughs. A small sound at first, just a roughness in his chest, like too much dust caught on his tongue. Marwenna hums to herself, a tune her mother once sang when the apple trees bloomed. The cough grows sharp, ragged. His hand clutches the table edge, rings scraping the wood. She lifts her eyes, meets his wild stare. No tears there, only the slow satisfaction of a woman who knows the stocks were never made for men like him. But poison, well, poison is a noose you tie with your own hands. Picture the servant boy outside the door, pressing his ear to the timber, eyes wide, breath fogging the cold stone. Tomorrow he'll run, maybe to the next village, maybe to the moors where the wolves won't ask what he's done. The chambermaid who crushed the bitter seeds into the spice will slip through the orchard at dawn, skirts trailing in the dew, a small purse of coins stitched into her hem. And Marwenna? She'll sit there a while longer, fingertips tracing the rim of her empty goblet, the wind lifting her hair from her shoulders like a lover's caress. She'll watch the hearth flame die low. She'll hum the orchard song until the last bubble of breath rattles in his throat and the room goes quiet at last. So, hush now. Step back from the tapestries. Careful not to snag your sleeve on the embroidered dragons that once guarded his secrets. Let the manner settle into its hush. The poison seep into the rushes where no stocks ever stood. Next, we'll follow the chambermaid's path at dawn, down to the riverbank where all secrets find their final hush, because even a sin washed clean with blood can drift downstream, waiting to bloom again when the orchard trees whisper in spring. Picture this, a river that winds behind the manor like a sly serpent, black in the early dawn, its surface whispering to the reeds that bow low to listen. It starts up in the hills, fed by snow melt and old tears, winding past the orchards, under the hedgerows where so many giggles and gasps have bloomed like nightshade. By the time it reaches the village, it's thick with everything spilled into it. Fish guts, wash water, the drifting petals of orchard blossoms torn down by midnight winds. And secrets, always secrets. There, on its muddy bank, stands the chambermaid, cloak drawn tight around her, hair tucked beneath a cap she borrowed from the scullery boy who won't ask questions. She kneels near the water's edge, where the frost has yet to thaw. In her hand, she clutches a scrap of cloth, silk torn from the Lord's sleeve when he clawed at the table, the poison already biting into his veins. A keepsake? A curse? Or just proof that her hands were never clean enough for the priest's blessing, and never will be. She dips the silk into the water, watches the red wine stain swirl out like a bruise fading on pale flesh. The reeds shiver as if they know what she's done. A single duck, startled from its sleep, flaps away upstream, the rush of its wings sending ripples across the surface that catch the pink glow of dawn. Picture her face, not afraid, not yet. There's a hush in her eyes, the same hush that clings to all who've carried sins too big for the village green and the stocks. A hush that knows the water can take it, at least for now. She whispers into the reeds. No prayers, just names. His name, her name, the lady's name, like she's binding them together one last time before the current snatches them away. She could run. She knows the way. Past the old orchard gate, down the hedgerow path where the thorn bushes claw at your hem, across the fields where the mist still clings like the breath of ghosts. She could vanish. A new village, a new name, the scrap of silver the lady pressed in her palm, hidden in her boot. But the river calls her back. Because here's the curious part. The river remembers. It keeps the secrets that the stocks, the confessional, the orchard bark, and the hayloft could not. It carries them past the mill where the wheel creaks with every turn. the miller's wife leaning out the window, wondering why her flower tastes faintly of sorrow that morning. Past the fords where the children splash in summer, kicking up sins they don't yet know the shape of. Past the bend where Ellen's name still drifts in the reeds. Her giggle turned ghost song when a jealous hand dragged her under all those seasons ago. The chambermaid dips her fingers in, feels the burn of the cold, the way the water slides around her wrist like a promise she isn't sure she wants kept. She imagines the poison washing away, not just the bitter taste that lingers in her mouth, but the stain of what she did with her own trembling hands. She imagines it slipping past the reeds, past the children's laughter, down to where the river grows fat and brown and joins the sea, where sins float so far they lose their names. But here's the thing, the river gives back what it takes. It never forgets entirely. A scrap of silk tangled in a branch when the thaw comes. A fisherman's net snagging on a ring meant to seal a marriage that curdled before the vows were ever spoken. A lock of hair drifting up against a sandbar, knotted with silt and the bones of reeds that remember every whispered promise. She stands at last, her knees damp with mud, the hush of the river wrapped around her ankles like a blessing and a thread all at once. She slips the silk scrap into the current, watches it bob and twirl before the water pulls it under. One secret down, 1,000 more tucked behind her eyes, her lips, her bitten tongue that holds every rumor the manor's high walls could never keep in. The river laps at the bank, whispering the same thing it's whispered since the first lovers stumbled down here with trembling hands. Secrets drift, secrets drown, secrets bloom in the reeds when the spring wind comes again. So, hush now. Step back from the muddy edge. Don't slip. Leave her there to watch the water pull the stain away, to trace her path into a dawn that smells of frost, mint, and a faint iron bite of old blood. Next, we'll drift one last time through the lanes, the orchard, the green, and find the hush that settles when every betrayal has been told, but the wind still rustles through the thatch, promising that no one's secret ever really sleeps forever. Picture this. The village lanes just before dawn fully breaks. Not quite dark, not quite light. Frost still clings to the thatch. The hedges shiver under the weight of old secrets that cling to every thorn. You can hear the muffled low of a cow waking in her stall, the soft creak of a cottage door as someone peeks out to see if the gossip that bloomed last night has already taken root on every tongue. But mostly, there's that hush. A hush stitched together from all the things we've seen tonight. Past the orchard trees, their carved hearts slick with dew. Initials swelling underbark that tries in vain to heal what the knife made permanent. Past the barn, where straw still carries the warmth of a love too soft to last till the rooster crowed. Past the old stocks on the green, where the oak beams smell of spit, shame, and the sweet rot of apples tossed by hands too eager to punish what they secretly crave. Imagine the villagers now, curled up behind wattle and daub walls, husbands and wives lying back to back on straw beds, their feet brushing under rough blankets, the hush of unspoken questions hanging heavy between them. Did you see him slip through the orchard? Did you hear her at the barn door? Did you notice how she rocked that empty cradle until the fire burned to ash? They won't say it aloud. Not yet. They'll say it over the wash tubs, the alehouse benches, the market stalls where gossip slips from mouth to mouth like a blessing and a blade at once. But for now, hush. The wind pushes at the shutters, rattles the rushes stuffed into the chinks in the walls. It sounds like whispers. It always does. Look there. The old priest stands at the chapel door, breath clouding the morning air as he mutters prayers for a flock too tangled in sin to confess every crooked thought. He knows the orchard's bruises. He knows the shape of a parishioner's eyes when they kneel and spit out half a truth. then hush the other half deep behind bitten lips. He hears the confessional creak like a ship's hull under storm, the wood swelling with secrets that would drown any soul foolish enough to believe they're gone for good. When he closes the door, the latch clicks like the snap of a bone, the last absolution that never truly settles. And the children? They run through the frost, feet bare, cheeks red as the orchard apples that never last the winter. They know the stories. They always do. They dare each other to creep up to the stocks at dusk, to press their ears to the bark of the oldest tree and swear they hear the weeping of lovers who never made it to the altar. They'll grow. They'll carve their own hearts into the orchard, slip behind barns when the moon is kind, hush each other with giggles that turn to curses when the river comes to claim its due. And the village will remember. It always does. Imagine the hush now. A living thing that settles in every rafter and thatch seam, curls under the church bell that tolls for weddings, for births, for drownings. It waits for the next secret, a promise pressed between two mouths under the maypole, a letter slipped through a cracked shutter, a blade tucked into a husband's boot. It knows the confessional door will swing wide again. The stocks will creak under fresh shame. The orchard bark will swell with new cuts. Because no matter how many times the river tries to carry it away, sin finds its way back. Love turns to betrayal. Betrayal turns to gossip. Gossip turns to hush. And hush waits. Patient as frost on the graveyard stones. Sly as the poison in the Lord's cup. Soft as a cradle that never rocks again. So, come closer. Let that hush settle in your chest tonight. Let it curl around your heart like the mist that drifts over the orchard before dawn. No need to speak. You know the stories now. How each lover who cheats risks the noose, the stocks, the river's cold mouth, or the sharp slip of a blade in the dark. How every secret grows roots in the orchard bark, in the graveyard yew, in the rushes of the green. Hush now. Rest your head against that ancient wall where a name was once carved and lost to moss. Sleep while the wind whispers through the thatch, carrying rumors you'll half remember when you wake. Because here, in the hush of a village that never forgets, no affair is ever truly buried. Not when the orchard blooms again come spring. And the wind? It always comes back to tell you. People will cheat, they will lie, they will weep at the stocks, and somewhere, someone will always be watching. Always.